As Royal Marines, we trace our history all the way back to 1664.
For 2.5 centuries, the Marine Corps has stood as the vanguard of freedom.
One says semper fi, always faithful, and the other prefers per mare per terram, by sea by land. They both call themselves Marines, both have hoofing uniforms, both run towards gunfire for a living. But there's one small difference. The Americans bring the entire orchestra, armour, planes, the lot. The British, well, let's just say our lads don't necessarily have all the gear, but still somehow manage to nick your lunch, give you a wedgie and leave you wondering what the hell just happened. Today we're comparing Britain's Royal Marines and the United States Marine Corps, two of the world's most elite amphibious forces. We'll be examining their history, including the times they fought against one another and side by side, and then we'll compare and contrast their current organisation, weapons and doctrine. Now, it's a long film today, so grab a wet, put your feet up while we find out which of these services would make Poseidon proud. Now, the Royal Marines are of course the older brother in this relationship, and like any older sibling, we remind the Americans of it whenever we can. I've made an entire video on the history of the bootnecks, but let's just give you a quick recap. In 1664, Charles II forms the Duke of York and Albany's Maritime Regiment of Foot, soldiers designed for shipboard fighting. In 1755, Parliament makes them permanent. By 1802, George III adds the word royal because they've been working their socks off fighting revolutionary France for the last 10 years. Across the Atlantic, the Yanks took notes. Now, as you know, the British military is my main area of research, so I may seem biased at times, and my cousins from across the pond can feel free to roast me in the comments. I'm sure I'll make mistakes, but I'll try not to. In 1775, as the American Revolution got going, the Second Continental Congress decided, we'll have some Marines too, thank you very much. Thus, the Continental Marines were born and were promptly used to attack British targets in the Caribbean. Yep, the first thing the US Marines ever did was fight us at the Battle of Nassau. Now, it wasn't a particularly exciting or important engagement, but we all need to start somewhere. At the end of that tragic civil war we now call the American War of Independence, splitters, the Continental Marines were disbanded. But not for long, as they were formally re-established in 1798. Now, one of the Corps' earliest proper Hollywood moments comes during the First Barbary War. Early 1800s, North Africa, pirates everywhere, not the fun Jack Sparrow type, but the kidnap your crew and sell them off as slaves variety. Not good guys. Enter General William Eaton, the US Navy's man on the ground. With him his first lieutenant, as the Yanks would say, Presley O'Bannon. These fellows clearly missed the briefing that said, don't try anything mad. They decide it's perfectly reasonable to march a tiny detachment of Marines, just 8 of them, plus 300 Arab and European mercenaries across the desert to have a crack at Tripoli and rescue the imprisoned crew of the USS Philadelphia. They don't quite get to Tripoli, they manage to storm the coastal town of Derna instead. Still a tidy feat for 8 blokes in blue. The action becomes legend, later immortalised in the Marines' hymn. The exiled ruler they backed, Prince Hamid Karamanli, I think, is so impressed that he presents O'Bannon with a Mameluke sword. That elegant curved blade becomes a symbol of the Corps itself, and to this day, Marine officers still wear a version of it. Not a bad legacy for 8 Marines and a very optimistic plan. But once they come up against our own bootnecks a few years later, the fight was even tougher for them.
Oh, and by the way, a very quick note on the nicknames. The British call their Royal Marines bootnecks. The Americans call theirs leathernecks. And both nicknames come from the same wonderfully uncomfortable bit of kit, the thick leather collars worn in the 18th and 19th centuries. Basically, it was the same as the stock worn by redcoats of the same period.
Take off your jackets and stocks.
It helped keep the chin up and stopped you slumping, and perhaps offered some protection from a sword or knife slash. Important when part of your job is protecting the ship's captain from those mutineers.
Bladensburg, 1814. Royal Marines and the US Marine Corps on opposite sides again. On this occasion, the Redcoats were victorious, though their American cousins did well. This article says, the Marines now anchoring the final line of defence, ready 2 18-pounder long guns designed even for use on board warships. When they fired, the salvo blew gaping holes in the enemy line, yet the British continued to advance. Recognising how dire the situation had become, Barney drew his sword and led the Marines in a desperate counter-attack. With bayonets and cutlasses, they surged forward, shouting, "Board 'em! Board 'em!" Not boredom, board them. The The brazen assault temporarily sent the redcoats reeling. The British infantry regrouped, then flanked the Americans from both sides while the Marines remained in the middle. Says the Marines stood their ground while militiamen to their left and right collapsed and the survivors started to flee. In their haste to escape, it says here, the retreating militiamen took the ammunition for the 18-pounders with them. Though they were surrounded on three sides alone and without cannonballs, the Marines fought on for another 3 hours. Finally, with a musket ball lodged in his thigh, Barney ordered his men to spike the cannons and retreat. A good effort, though if the militia are in such a rush to retreat, why would they take the heavy ammo of the 18-pounders with them? I think that deserves a bit more research and a closer look, just saying. Anyway, the good news is that the Brits were victorious and the White House was burned down. Hurrah! We used to be a real country, didn't we, eh? Hard as nails. We were once, maybe we will be again, who knows. Okay, so another key moment for the US Marines was the Mexican-American War of 1847. At the Battle of Chapultepec, I'm English, give me a break. Anyway, here the US Marines stormed the castle in Mexico City. It's said that the Marines suffered a staggering 90% casualties, and that the famous red stripe on the Marine dress blues, the blood stripe, honours the officers and NCOs who died charging that hill. Technically, versions of the stripe existed before the war, but as with all good military legends, why ruin a perfectly heroic story with awkward facts? This event is also the inspiration for another line from the Marines' hymn, the official song of the United States Marine Corps. Meanwhile, across the pond, the Royal Marines were busy policing the Empire, popping up all over the place and earning their first Victoria Cross during the Crimean War against those pesky Russians. In 1900, as the Boxer Rebellion erupts and the foreign legations in Peking scream for help, a small detachment of Royal Marines, just 76 men and 3 officers, steps off British ships on the Chinese coast and marches into history. They fight through the siege in shirt sleeves and dust, trading rifle volleys, artillery fire and street-to-street scraps with Boxer and Imperial troops. Amid the chaos, something remarkable happens. Shoulder to shoulder with American Marines for the first time, the two corps fight a desperate little war together. Captain Myers of the US Marine Corps leads a joint sortie, Royal Marines, US Marines and Russians storming a Chinese barricade in brutal close-quarter fighting, bayonets and grit doing what diplomacy could not. It's messy, violent work, but the barricade falls and the Marines hold it. For 2 months they endure mines, bombardment and frantic night attacks until the relief force fights its way into Peking. When the gates finally open, Royal Marines and US Marines go forward again, clearing streets, protecting civilians and forcing the last resistance to break. Royal Marines earn medals for gallantry, their American counterparts do the same. It isn't yet the modern era of amphibious task forces and combined operations, but in the dust and smoke of Peking, the Royal Marines and the US Marine Corps learn something. When the situation turns desperate and the world looks away, there are worse allies to have than a Marine in the trench next to you. The bond between the two corps doesn't begin on a sunny parade square, it begins here under fire in a foreign city. But now let's fast forward to World War I, a war that saw both sets of amphibious warriors in the thick of brutal fighting. When the war kicks off, the Royal Marines aren't just polishing brass on battleships, they form part of the brand new Royal Naval Division, heading to Belgium in 1914 to try and shore up Antwerp. Then it's off to the Dardanelles in 1915, amphibious landings at Gallipoli, trench warfare under the hot Turkish sun. They're also the last troops off the beaches when the Gallipoli campaign winds down, a textbook withdrawal under the noses of the Ottomans, with the Marines covering everyone else's exit and then slipping away like ghosts. And they don't stop there, heavy fighting on the Western Front, and then in 1918, Bootnecks are leading the raid on Zeebrugge. It's incredibly daring and foreshadows the role of the Royal Marines in World War II and beyond. 5 Royal Marines earned the Victoria Cross during World War I, 2 at Zeebrugge, 1 at Gallipoli, 1 at Jutland and 1 on the Western Front. A small corps, but everywhere the action's nastiest they seem to turn up. And the US Marine Corps, well of course the Yanks turn up late, goes without saying, but they make up for it by giving the overstretched British and French armies a chance to recover. When America enters the First World War on the 6th of April 1917, the Marine Corps joins the American Expeditionary Force under General Pershing. Unlike many branches scrambling to catch up, the Marines already have a solid core of battle-tested officers and NCOs thanks to the plethora of small wars they'd been fighting for the last 20 odd years. Now they expand rapidly. They start the war with just over 500 officers and around 13,000 enlisted men. By the armistice they've swelled to over 70,000 men. And then comes Belleau Wood 1918, the battle that stamps the Corps into legend. Many historians consider this battle as the defining event in the history of the US Marine Corps. As the Corps' first large-scale engagement, this World War I battle foreshadowed epic marine battles to come. As it says in this excellent Marine Corps Times article, at 1700 hours on June 6, 1918, the 4th Marine Brigade, comprising 5th and 6th Marine Regiments and the 6th Machine Gun Battalion, attacked into the densely wooded former hunting preserve near the French village of Belleau to push back elements of the German 237th Division. By the end of the first day, the Marines had suffered over 1,000 dead or wounded, more casualties than the Corps had taken thus far in its 143-year history. The Marines kept fighting, however, and by June the 26th they had secured the wood. The combined casualty count for US Marine and Army units committed to the battle totalled around 1,800 dead and nearly 8,000 wounded. So that's some hard work for sure. But there are a couple of myths that have stemmed from that fight and are often now taken as fact. For example, according to marine law, the Germans take to calling them Teufelhunden, devil dogs, impressed by their ferocious attacks and their ability to hit targets at ridiculous ranges. The reality? Well, the nickname actually appears in print weeks before the battle and was probably coined by a creative war correspondent rather than a terrified German officer. Also, as David Zebeck points out here, another legend arising from Belleau Wood is that the Lone Marine Brigade had stopped Operation Blucher, the 42 Division attack that the Germans had launched on May the 27th, and in thwarting that attack the Marines had prevented the Germans from capturing Paris and thereby winning the war. Indeed, since 1918, many books and articles have cited the German drive to Paris and credited the Marines with stopping it. That makes a great story, but the overwhelming weight of historical evidence indicates that no such thing actually happened. But facts rarely stand in the way of a good regimental myth. Let's be honest, the British military is full of such myths. Maybe I should make a video about that one day. Let me know in the comments which myths you think would be interesting for me to look at. It's a good idea. Anyway, let's fast forward to World War II. Once again, our cousins were late to the party, but we can't deny that the US Marine Corps did an incredible job in the Pacific Theatre battling the Japanese. They fought the battles of Guadalcanal, Guam, Saipan, Iwo Jima, Okinawa and loads more. Nearly 87,000 Marines were casualties during World War II, including 20,000 killed. 82 were awarded the Medal of Honor. Incredible. Meanwhile, big changes were taking place in the Royal Marines. As I said in my recent video on Royal Marines history, in 1942 the first Royal Marine Commando unit was formed, 40 Commando. More followed, 4-1, 4-2, 4-3 and so on, each trained in the black arts of amphibious assault, demolitions, mountain warfare and not sleeping for 3 days straight. And to mark the shift they were given something new, the Green Beret, now an iconic symbol of elite status. Their role was evolving, less big army, more special operations. All through the Second World War the Royal Marines aren't just tagging along, they're in the thick of it. Italy, Normandy, the Adriatic, Burma. If there was coastline to sneak up on or a fortress to kick in at dawn, chances are a bunch of Green Beret maniacs in scrambling boots were involved. Then peace. 1946, the army winds down its commando units. Most forces pack away the raiding gear and head back to normal soldiering. The Royal Marines, they go the opposite way. The commando role doesn't fade, it becomes the core. From then on, every Marine earns the Green Beret, every Marine goes through commando training. Elite is no longer a subunit, it's the standard, it's the ordinary in the Marine Commandos. And since World War II, well, both units have been super busy.
You guessed it. Korea. Korea in December 1950.
During the Korean War, they were once again side by side. In November 1950, 4-1 Independent Commando is working as part of the US 1st Marine Division. Old friends from Peking reunited in a very different war and a very different climate. This time the fighting isn't in palace courtyards but in frozen mountains, where temperatures drop low enough to freeze weapons and men alike. Lieutenant Colonel Douglas Drysdale takes command of a scratch force, Royal Marines, US Marines and South Koreans. Nearly 900 troops in all. Task Force even. Their mission, fight their way to the Chosan Reservoir and keep the road open under relentless Chinese attacks. It's brutal hand-to-hand, white-knuckle fighting through snow, ice, ambush after ambush. But they hold. They get the Marines through, and for standing shoulder to shoulder with the 1st Marine Division in one of the Corps' darkest, proudest moments, 4-1 Commando earns the US Presidential Unit Citation, a rare honour for any foreign unit. Bureaucracy being what it is, the award doesn't arrive until 1957, but the respect between the two corps is forged long before the paperwork catches up. Then came Vietnam. Obviously the Brits weren't there, but the US Marines were in deep. They arrive as advisors, then surge in after Tonkin, first guarding Da Nang's airbase, then spreading into villages and jungle to fight a messy counterinsurgency. By 1966, nearly 70,000 Marines are in country, patrolling rice paddies, flying fast jets and Hueys, and hammering both guerrillas in the south and North Vietnamese regulars along the DMZ. The map fills with battles, bunkers and names burned into core memory. Tet 1968 becomes the breaking point. Marines fight street by street in Hue and endure a 77-day siege at Khe Sanh, winning the tactical fight but losing the public war back home. Withdrawals follow. By the early 70s, most Marine units are gone, returning only as advisors and to offer air support during the Easter offensive.
From midday to past midnight, a constant shuttle of naval helicopters airlifted out of that embassy more than 5,000 people.
In 1975, they conduct dramatic embassy evacuations in Phnom Penh and Saigon. Nearly 500,000 Marines serve in Vietnam. More than 13,000 are killed and 88,000 wounded. A hard, costly decade, and a reminder that courage can win battles, but not always the war. Over the following decades, the Royal Marines deploy in Northern Ireland and of course the Falklands War, where they're very heavily involved, demonstrating a textbook display of amphibious and mountain warfare and earning serious plaudits for their incredible efforts. Meanwhile, the US Marine Corps were involved in Operation Urgent Fury, the 1983 invasion of Grenada. Yep, think Gunny Highway and the film Heartbreak Ridge. Classic stuff.
My name is Gunnery Sergeant Highway, and I've drunk more beer and pissed more blood, busted more than all you numbnuts put together.
And then we get to the GWOT, the Global War on Terror. In late November 2001, the 15th and 26th Marine Expeditionary Unit, or MEU, were the first conventional US ground forces to deploy to Afghanistan in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. And the Royal Marines were the first British troops to deploy to Afghanistan after 9/11. 40 Commando secured Bagram Airfield and went on to patrol the streets of Kabul. As an aside, I spent time in Helmand province with the Marines of 40 Commando, both in 2007 and again in 2012. I patrolled with them from FOB Gibraltar and later from Patrol Base Clifton. I was a civilian making a documentary with them, and those lads really took me under their wing and treated me like one of them, something I'll always be grateful for. Brilliant blokes.
Lads, wet. Chris is making them. T2. T2. Everyone's T2, by the way, Chris. And
T2, white T2.
Yeah, white T2. It's the NATO standard wet T2.
I'm the same, actually.
Yeah, it's got to be done.
Then a new war in 2003, the Royal Marines lead the assault on the Al-Faw Peninsula in Iraq. Meanwhile, one Marine Expeditionary Force, vast and hard-hitting, crosses the border from Kuwait and punches through Iraqi defences at speed, its tanks and infantry fighting vehicles kicking up dust all the way to Baghdad. At Nasiriyah, the Marines meet stiff resistance, an early test of the invasion and a brutal reminder that speed doesn't always mean safety. They fight through ambushes, confusion and urban chaos, proving again that flexibility and aggression remain the Corps' trademarks. When Baghdad finally collapses and Saddam's statue is dragged down, it's Marines who help finish the job. Good work. But just the beginning of 20 years of fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan, a busy and exciting period of high-tempo operations that saw both forces sharpen their skills to an incredible level. Right, it's nearly Christmas, which means you or someone you have to tolerate and buy a present for needs something related to military history. And luckily for you, I've got just the thing. If you want to show the world you're a cultured, battle-hardened individual, you can wear merch like this. T-shirts, hoodies, mugs, all the important kit. Apparently, they're a hit on Tinder profile photos, or so I'm told. And if you ever find yourself accidentally wandering into an Antifa rally, you'll stand out like a beacon of good taste and sensible politics. Oh, and they have them for the lady in your life. This is my missus. She wears this stuff all the time wherever she goes. Links are below. You can go to redcoathistory.com/merch or go to redcoathistory.myspreadshop.co.uk. Not into clothing? Fine, be difficult, whatever. But luckily for you, I've got books. These are my 2 Peninsular War books. I'm working on part 3. Hopefully I'll get it done eventually. And here's my book on the Anglo-Zulu War. And yes, there's a children's book about the Thin Red Line at Balaclava. Perfect for kids or adults who behave like kids. Find out more by going to redcoathistory.com/books.
Now, if you really want to support the channel, buy me a Christmas present without the hassle of having to wrap anything, the absolute best thing you can do is join my membership here at YouTube. Costs about $5 a month. For the same price, you can also join my Patreon page, patreon.com/redcoathistory. With both of those, you get early access to my videos as well as extra content not available anywhere else. It's really fun. Links are all below. In the meantime, let's get back to the film and have a bloody good Christmas. As a military history geek, you deserve it.
Okay, so that's a brief look at the parallel history of the Royal Marines and the US Marine Corps. But what's happening now? What are the differences and similarities? Well, here's the big difference, of course: scale. The Royal Marines number around 7,000 personnel, a small elite commando force under the Royal Navy. Meanwhile, the United States Marine Corps fields around 170,000 active and another 30-odd thousand reserves. Let that sink in. The US Marine Corps outnumbers the entire British armed forces. Yep, it's bigger than our Army, Navy and Air Force combined. I believe they're technically part of the US Navy, but are essentially independent. They can operate virtually on their own with their own armour, air support, artillery, logistics and special operations forces. It's incredible. The Royal Marines, meanwhile, are much more reliant on the Royal Navy and also the Army. For example, the artillery, engineering and logistics elements of the UK Commando Force are supplied by the Army. Soldiers who have passed the All Arms Commando course and earned their green lid and commando flash. But they aren't Marines, and I'm sure the Marines let them know that at every opportunity. So the US Marine Corps have MARSOC, which is their own special forces, and the Royal Marines have one known as the SBS, or Special Boat Service. They're considered the sister regiment of the more famous SAS, or Special Air Service.
Our job will be to attach these bombs to the hull of ships below the waterline.
The SBS specialises in three main jobs: surveillance and reconnaissance, i.e. slipping in unseen to gather intel or mark targets; offensive action, directing airstrikes, calling in naval gunfire or handling the job personally with explosives and small arms; and then support and influence, training allies overseas, shaping local forces from the shadows. They're also Britain's rapid response teams for both military and maritime counter-terrorism, the people who get the call when things go bad, fast. On paper, the SBS and the SAS look much the same selection, same Directorate of Special Forces Command. The difference lies in the water. The SBS carries the Royal Navy's flag within the UK Special Forces, trained and equipped to lead where sea meets land, boarding ships, raiding from the surf, or ghosting upriver long before anyone knows they're there. So you get the point. The Royal Marines are tiny compared to the Yanks. They are the precision raiders, light, fast and adaptable. The Americans, they're their own self-contained ecosystem, a vast force. But here's the thing, that smaller size gives the Royal Marines flexibility the Americans probably only dream of. We can deploy a commando team in a few hours. The Royal Marines are designed to be an elite force where every member is expected to perform at commando level. This focus allows them to operate as a precision instrument, or the scalpel, in Britain's military toolkit. But as we all know, the reality is that quantity has a quality all of its own, and sometimes the sledgehammer is a better tool than the scalpel. Sometimes you just need to send loads of heavily armed angry blokes halfway around the world to smash things up, and that's the advantage the US Marine Corps have. They've got the men, the money and the kit that the Royal Marines can only dream of.
It's one of the hardest programs in the world, but that's because it's one of the hardest jobs in the world.
Okay, so we've looked at history and we've compared size, but what about training? Nowhere is the difference clearer than in training. To earn the Green Beret, a Royal Marine recruit endures 32 weeks, the longest and toughest infantry training in NATO. That's 8 months of crawling through Dartmoor mud, yomping 30 miles with full kit and ironing shirts until they could slice cheese. You learn to shoot, swim, fight and yes, brush your teeth properly and wash your balls in the correct manner. I'm not joking, instructors literally show you how to wash behind your foreskin.
Okay, first thing, get yourself under the water, get yourself soaked through.
And it's fair enough, because if you can't manage your man bits and keep them clean, you probably can't manage a machine gun in action.
Failure is a part of Royal Marines training because people don't meet the standard.
Attrition rate, anywhere from 40 to 75% depending on the intake. It's brutal. And that's just the physical side. Mentally it forges discipline, the kind of quiet confidence that doesn't need shouting to prove itself.
We make Marines who overpower the desire to quit with the perseverance to prevail.
Now across the Atlantic things are done differently. I'm no expert, so I went to the Marines website itself to find out more. It says here, recruits learn quickly in Marine Corps recruit training that what doesn't stop them only makes them more purposeful. That seems a clunky way of saying what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, doesn't it? Anyway, let's carry on. Recruit training is a demanding process, but also an exacting one, as this is the training that has made Marines our entire country has counted on for nearly 2.5 centuries. 13 weeks of trial and triumph are divided into 4 phases and culminates with the Crucible. It says this is a 54-hour day and night test of endurance. It will challenge you both mentally and physically. You'll be asked to perform on little sleep and little food. The Crucible is a test to see how you will react and respond to conditions of stress and simulated combat. You'll learn how to rely on your fellow recruits and develop deeply personal bonds in doing so. You will work as a close-knit team, connected by a common cause and refusal to quit. Once you pass this demanding phase of recruit training, you'll feel an immense purpose and unmistakable pride that you have what it takes to win the battle in front of you and within you as a United States Marine.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me.
Now, I was a bit confused as to why the training was actually so short, but never fear, the lads and ladies then go on to a second stage. For example, according to Marines.com, if your MOS or military occupational specialty is infantry, then you do a further 59-day course. It says here, Marines are instructed in marksmanship, patrolling, grenade usage, IDing and countering improvised explosive devices, and land navigation, amongst other various infantry skills. In doing so, the Infantry Training Battalion provides the Corps with Marines who are fully prepared for combat service. So comprehensive training for sure, but very different and still quite a bit shorter than the Royal Marines training. And bear in mind, even cooks in the Royal Marines will do the full course. I think this difference in length of training reflects a fundamental difference in philosophy. The Royal Marines is designed as an elite special operations capable force where every Marine operates at a high individual standard, while the US Marine Corps is designed for global deployment and sustained large-scale operations requiring large numbers of capable Marines. And that's not a criticism of the Leathernecks, it's just a different job. From what I saw with my own eyes, the British Marines actually have a lot of respect for the US Marine Corps. When I was with them in Helmand, Delta Company 40 Commando had an officer seconded from the US Marine Corps, and he was well liked by the lads, really respected. I also just came across this article that you may find interesting. It says that a US Marine Corps officer has been awarded the Commando Medal after putting in a superb performance on the All-Arms Commando course run by the Royal Marines. Captain Brown also earned the right to wear the famous Green Beret after completing the course, and Captain Brown was awarded the top student and the Commando Medal. Impressive work, but by the way, just to clarify though, the All Arms course is the course the Commandos run for other units to qualify for the Green Beret. It's not the actual Commando course itself, but is shorter and different. That's not me undermining Captain Brown's achievement, but it is an important technical point that I think Royal Marines would be mad with me if I don't point out. I also learned while researching for this video that a Royal Marines Colour Sergeant serves as the Senior Physical Training Advisor to the Commanding Officer at the US Marine Corps Officer Candidate School in Quantico. It's part of a long-running exchange between the two corps that's been in place since 1972. The Royal Marines send a physical training instructor, a Colour Sergeant, which I understand is the equivalent to a US Marine Master Sergeant, to oversee the entire physical training programme for officer candidates and staff. He shapes the fitness syllabus, mentors instructors, and keeps future American officers honest on the parade ground. The exchange isn't one way, of course. While the Royal Marines lend their fitness expertise, the US Marine Corps sends an instructor from its Martial Arts Centre of Excellence to join the Royal Marines and help develop close combat training. It's a small arrangement, but it speaks volumes. Two corps with shared traditions, swapping specialists to make each other even sharper. It's a good idea. Right, let's move on to gear. Don't worry, I'll keep this short or else this video might end up being 3 hours long. Here's where you really see the difference between British thrift and American spending habits. The Royal Marines are transitioning at the minute to the KS-1 rifle. Built by the Americans at Knight Armament, it replaces the old SA-80 bullpup, which let's be honest, no one's going to miss. The Yanks meanwhile have gone all in on the HKM-27, a rifle so good they've replaced both the M4 and the squad-light machine gun with it. Vehicles? Well, the Royal Marines use a mix. Let's have a look. There's the Viking, personnel armoured vehicle, all-terrain vehicles capable of operating anywhere in the world in temperatures from minus 46 degrees Celsius to 49 degrees Celsius. The Royal Marines use quad bikes to give them the edge in combat. Small, lightweight and agile, these vehicles allow mortars and their crews to be moved rapidly around the battlefield, avoiding detection. Then there's the Polaris MRZR, I don't know how you pronounce that. This ultralight off-roader is designed for rapid movement across the battlefield, getting our commandos to enemy positions quicker and then getting them back out again faster. Turbocharged and ready to carry supplies and equipment, these vehicles are easily transportable and are designed to be as expeditionary as the troops who count on them. Then there's the Jackal II. Jackal II is a high mobility weapons platform with a unique airbag suspension, according to this, allowing rapid movement across varying terrain. It's designed to protect personnel against roadside explosions and mine attacks. Jackal II is armed with a general purpose GPMG machine gun for crew protection and can carry either a heavy machine gun or a grenade machine gun as the main weapons system in the fire support role. Now, if we listed all the kit the Yanks have, we'd be here all day, but I did want to flag air power. The Royal Marines don't have any of their own. They borrow from the Fleet Air Arm, which provides Merlins and Wildcats for transport and support. Fast jets, that's down to the RAF or Royal Navy F-35s. The Americans, well, they bring their own Air Force, F-35Bs, Ospreys, Cobras, heavy lift choppers, the works. It's called the Aviation Combat Element, and it's all Marine owned and operated. They fly themselves to war while we call for a lift. It's the difference between owning a car yourself or knowing the number of a reliable taxi company who may or may not have enough vehicles to pick you up when you need them. Okay, so let's look at the latest news on both forces and where they're heading. Well, both are changing fast and in oddly similar directions. The Royal Marines are reinventing themselves as the future commando force. The idea, smaller, lighter, more discreet, operating in what they're calling literal response groups, forward deployed around the world to hit quote-unquote grey zone threats, raids, reconnaissance, sabotage. Now, hands up, I had to Google what literal meant. According to the dictionary, it means relating to or situated on the shore of the sea or a lake or a region lying along a shore. Now, to dive deeper, I found this article. It says the LRG is part of a broader initiative to adapt the UK's amphibious forces to operate in a more dispersed and agile way in response to the increasingly challenging environments that they're now facing. These adaptations include a new future commando force as reforms to the Royal Marines are being dubbed, with greater focus on technology and raiding missions from the sea. This force's news article goes into even more detail on how commando units will look moving forward. Traditionally, Royal Marines operate in sections of 8, but as part of the future commando force, commandos have been testing these smaller groups. A training exercise last summer saw 60 Royal Marines from 40 commandos split into 3 groups while trying to find and fight each other at Bovington Training Area in Dorset. Marine Edward Hart of 40 Commandos said they were testing the new concept by going as 4-man teams. As well as a change in the number of personnel, these smaller teams also tested the future commando force concept by allowing more autonomy, with the skill set of personnel being tailored to each mission. Larger teams have also been trialled, Royal Marines taking part in Literal Response Group Experimentation in Cyprus in October tried operating in groups of 12 rather than 8, allowing for more specialists to be involved. The same article goes on to describe new kit they've been trialling, including UAVs or drones for supplies and head cameras for live feeds from the sharp end. This article goes on to point out integration with UK Special Forces has deepened. Royal Marines regularly serve with the Special Forces Support Group and contribute personnel to the SBS, which we discussed earlier. The Vanguard Strike Company concept blurs the line between elite, conventional and special operations forces, with commandos training alongside the new Ranger Regiment and supporting broader strategic operations around the globe. In one Arctic trial, Marines launched from a submarine in inflatable boats to raid a notional enemy shore, the kind of mission once reserved for special forces alone. Despite modernisation, the Royal Marines have returned to some traditional strengths. Their Arctic warfare expertise is in demand once again, particularly as Russian activity increases in the high north. In 2022, over 1,000 Marines participated in NATO's exercise Cold Response, reaffirming their status as the UK's Arctic experts. The Literal Response Groups put commando strike teams to sea across the globe, modern raiders ready to act at a moment's notice. They are once again what the public has long imagined them to be, agile seaborne shock troops, now operating with drones and data support. And what about our cousins over the pond? What are they up to? Well, the US Marine Corps is undergoing its own transformation under a program called Force Design. It's refocusing on the Pacific, preparing for island-hopping warfare against a peer enemy, namely China. They've traded heavy armour for mobility, long-range precision and distributed operations across chains of islands. It's a return to their World War II roots, only now with drones, rockets and better sun cream. Despite the size difference, both forces are converging on a similar concept: agility, flexibility and survivability in a world of drones, missiles and satellites. The US Marine Corps are also keen on this term littoral and are forming Marine Littoral Regiments. Here's a description from Marines.mil. An MLR will be a self-deployed multi-domain force optimised for the contact and blunt layers. It will persistently operate across the competition continuum to support the joint forces role in ensuring allies, partners and deterring adversaries, conducting and enabling joint force contact, blunt and surge activities. Who writes this nonsense? That's a classic waffle bomb, isn't it? Maybe I'm just dumb, so if you understand that, comment below. And if you wrote it, take a long hard look at yourself in the mirror. So the US Marine Corps and the Royal Marines share a long history and a similar role as allies and brothers in arms. Is there still rivalry? Of course, it's alive and well. During exercise Green Dagger in 2021, Royal Marines reportedly defeated their US Marine Corps counterparts in a simulated battle. By infiltrating their HQ and taking out key assets, the Americans called it a valuable training opportunity. This article says, the commandos proved superior to the US Marine Corps while conducting their exercises at the Marine Corps Air Ground Combat Center at 29 Palms. The LRG won decisive battles early on, according to the Royal Navy, but soon found the Marine Corps pushing into Allied territory. To counter the advance, commandos and allies carried out raids behind enemy lines, infiltrating the US Marine Corps' position and striking assets critical to the US defence and ability to coordinate their own attacks. Top work, lads. Right, so what's the verdict? The US Marine Corps is a behemoth, a global strike force capable of launching full-scale invasions from the sea and sustaining them for months. They've got the manpower, the kit and the budget of a small country. They're the sledgehammer. When America swings, the world feels it. The Royal Marines, by contrast, are the scalpel, small, surgical and devastatingly effective when applied with precision. Perhaps the average Royal Marine is closer to US Force Recon Marines, that sort of thing. They don't need to conquer continents, they slip in, get the job done and disappear before the Americans have finished building the airfield. Both share the same DNA though: adaptability, toughness, loyalty. And both, when the shooting starts, are exactly the kind of people you want next to you, or in my case as a natural born coward, preferably a long way in front. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to comment, like, subscribe and watch the video on screen now, as I think you'll love it. Take care and I'll be back next week, and apologies to Americans if I've mispronounced or got anything wrong. Let me know in the comments. Cheers guys.